Hey, what's up you guys, this is Rob from Gay Guy Plays, and today on the Quick Draw, we are revisiting an old flamer when we take a look at the Ignis. Now, it's rare that a status weapon piques my interest the way the Ignis does, and it's not just because you can make it look like it's spewing semen, or the fact that you can turn it into a fart gun. It's honestly because after its recent rework, the Ignis is an awesome representation of a status weapon at its best. And, while it's still not something I would consider bringing into high tiers, I do have to admit that it makes me wonder if support weapons could make it into the meta. Now, you can pick up the Ignis' blueprints in the Grenier lab of your clan dojo. Just be aware that it requires Mastery Rank 4 and will cost you a Forma and a couple detonite injectors to craft. Also keep in mind that this weapon is exclusively available through your dojo, so no wallet warrioring a shortcut on this one. Okay, so the Ignis' sole damage type is Heat, which as we know is granted bonuses against Infested, Infested Flesh, and Clone Flesh, but suffers resistance against Proto Shielding. Now, while Heat isn't the greatest to combo, it does work well with a couple of elements to trigger crowd control effects, namely Radiation's Confusion and Blast's Knockdown. Now, all of the changes made have turned this into one powerful crowd control weapon. Its effective cone of fire range has been extended to 40 meters, with a small blast radius that allows you to deal damage slightly outside of that with diminishing effect, which, at the moment, also seems to bypass nullifier shields. It's also been granted a 2-meter punch through, allowing its cone to affect multiple enemies and bypass most cover. Combine that with its increased magazine size, increased ammo size, built-in multi-shot, as well as a halfway decent fire rate, and you've got the potential to inflict a lot of status. Interestingly enough, the built-in 170% multi-shot acts like an added boost to its base damage and status chance, taking the heat from 10 damage up to 27, and the status chance from 10 to 25%. Now, from the UI alone, you can tell that this is a multiplicative boost as opposed to an additive, as adding additional multi-shot doesn't combine with its innate, but instead layers on top, multiplying the overall effect. At its core, it basically means that you're getting more damage and more status per second. Speaking of its status, with just a split chamber and speed trigger, you're already sitting at a 40% status chance, while swapping in a Vile Acceleration brings it up to 47%. This is one of the few weapons in game that can actually be modded past 100% status. Now, all of this synergizes beautifully. The increased range allows you to engage at a substantial distance with suppressive statuses like Blast Knockdown or Radiation's Confusion, giving enemies very little response time to retaliate. The punch through ensures that you're tagging multiple enemies with control statuses or debuffs like Viral and Corrosive, and all of the increases to ammo ensure that you're inflicting them at a fairly regular rate. Now, notice the fact that I haven't really touched on the damage. The fact is, while this may be adequate for most of the star chart, once you hit more challenging missions, it's really not all too impressive. However, in a group composition that already has significant damage output, this may prove to be an awesome support weapon. Now, since we're turning lemons into lemonade, can we talk? Okay, so as most of you know, I am not the biggest fan of status. In fact, I'm sure you can audibly hear me roll my eyes whenever someone tries to convince me that it's better than it really is. For the most part, status weapons are kinda like a cup of noodles, which is also very similar to a handjob. See, while a cup of noodles isn't gonna be at the top of a lot of people's list of favorite foods, toss in some sriracha, a few bean sprouts, maybe even an egg, or go full gourmet on that shit, and it'll definitely satisfy. Which in this case is a great representation of the Ignis. All of the ingredients came together and created something that made status builds kind of fun. Not as satisfying as crit weapons, but let's face it, toss me a massive dick, the right lube, as well as one hot O-face, and even a boring old handjob can keep me entertained. Now, for those of you who haven't left for food, or porn, let's get back to the quick draw. So all in all, while it's not something that I'll personally be using very often, I can definitely see what status fans would like in this weapon. And while its damage output isn't going to blow anyone away, all of the stat tweaks work quite well to help the Ignis afflict the battlefield with whatever ailment they choose to equip. Just be prepared to throw down a few Forma, as the Ignis comes with no innate polarities. Because let's face it, status weapons do need a bit of love in order to make them interesting, kinda like handjobs need at least 8 inches. So thank you all for watching another episode of The Quick Draw. If you haven't already caught it, be sure to check out my rundown on yet another status weapon, the Basalt. However, if you're in the mood for a bit of nostalgia, be sure to slide on over to the original pre-damage 2.0 Ignis rundown. Now, don't forget to do all the things that I ask you to do at the end of every one of these, and as always, stay tuned for more noodles and O-faces here at A Gay Guy Plays. So just a fun fact, whatever element you slot in that ends up combining with fire will actually dictate the particle effects that come out of the Ignis. At the top right, we've got plain old fire, top left is a more concentrated blast, bottom left is gas, which kinda looks like semen, and bottom right is gadiation in all its glory. Regardless, be sure to equip the appropriate elemental combos in order to serve up the optimal amount of sexy particle goodness.